this one is an interesting one. If you had to recommend one method, one experiment to definitely establish binding mode early in a program, what would that be and why?
Oh, I purport that doing a Schild experiment is a good start. Why is that? Well, first of all, if you have a PAM, you're done. It's got to be allosteric. So forget that. We're talking about antagonists now. So you get a compound, it can shift the curve to the right with or without depression of maximal response. Neither of those things will tell you if it's allosteric or it's orthosteric, because both of those phenotypes are consistent with that depending on kinetics. So now, probe dependence for a NAM, as I said earlier, yeah, you have to shift the curve as far out as you could to see where the curvature occurs. Not a great way to do it. The best thing is look for saturation. That is probably the number one key. If you start to shift the curve, for example, L-curonium is a muscarinic NAM. It's the most dramatic thing you've ever seen. You get these beautiful parallel shifts to acetylcholine, threefold, 10-fold, 30-fold, and pretty soon you come to a wall at about 40-fold. That's it. You can pour this stuff in. There's no way it'll shift beyond that. That's definitive evidence. You've got it. You've got an allosteric. Again, a one-way experiment. If you see it, great. If you don't, keep trying with something else. Having said that, what's the way to optimize that experiment? In this case, I would say, yeah, if you've got a really sensitive system, that's the one to use. So if you have a receptor overexpressed where your agonist is giving you picomolar EC50s, that's the one to use. Why? Because that gives you the maximum range. You could probably produce 10, 100,000-fold shifts in that kind of system, giving you the best chance to see a saturable effect. If you use a less sensitive system, you're going to buck up against the concentrations. They'll be so high that it'll be difficult to shift the curve beyond that, other than causing secondary effects and so forth. So my short answer is do a Schild experiment in a very sensitive system. The other thing, we are currently working out a new method, which at some point I'll write up. It's called a reverse Schild. So now you do a curve to the allosteric molecule if it's a partial agonist in the presence of a concentration of the full reference agonist that gives you a response above the maximal response of your allosteric. Why do that? Because then all orthosterics, as you keep adding the partial agonist, will bring the full agonist down to the level of the partial agonist. Allosterics will not. They'll stay up there. And that's one other way. But you need a partial agonist there.
I love it. Thank you.
So Terry, I've got it. I'll ask you the same question that Yamina asked you. What would be the experiment you would do for a positive allosteric modulator?
Yeah. Again, certainly PAM's no-brainer. You're good. You're presumably talking about an antagonist, right? So you do an agonist curve, you add your putative allosteric, orthosteric inhibitor, and you see an effect. You can't rely on shift without or with depression of max. It's got to be that saturation of effect. Do a nice... Now, oh, wait. Jay, you actually triggered you could turn it around. We often screen in an antagonist mode. We give say an EC50 of an agonist, and then we add our putative antagonist, right? Mm-hmm. So you'll get that inverse so-called displacement curve. And if it goes to 0, that could be allosteric, orthosteric. All orthosterics will take it to 0. eventually. If you add, instead of an EC80, do an EC400. Go up on the agonism, then try that displacement curve. Allosterics frequently don't give you complete displacement. So that's easier than doing a Schild plot and saturating it and all that. You're seeing incomplete displacement. You see that, that's consistent with an allosteric molecule, because an orthosteric, you give enough, you'll take it to zero. So maybe do a high dose radioligand or agonist and antagonist displacement curve and see if you can bring the response to zero. If you can't, that'll be presumptive evidence that it's an allosteric. Having said that, if you're doing functional, make darn sure your antagonist is not a partial agonist, because they too will bring it down and then stop. Otherwise, that's a quick way to do it. Again, you're relying on luck. Gosh, I chose everything right, and I see it.
Right. Okay, thanks.